It really is true. The more vulnerable you can be about your own insecurities, you give permission to others to feel the
How does a
same.
person answer why something happens?
When you look at the findings in different fields,
Scant is the part of life in which we live.
To attain the highest values.
You need to have a work-life balance, and you need to separate work
Right.
and life. Like you talk about actually integrating that. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's been a journey for me. As I said, for most of my life, I was really keeping them separate. And so it feels like you're trying on clothes that don't fit when I try and integrate them in the beginning. It feels awkward. I feel socially awkward, sometimes. Yeah. But as I do it more, like any skill you develop, right? I realize that we're human fundamentally, right? And so while we label ourselves as being an entrepreneur, or being a teacher, or being a mom, those labels around our identity can serve us, but they can also isolate us. And so for me, it's about almost, certainly I have an identity as a mom and an entrepreneur, but in those moments, I try and strip that all away, and I try and think about, okay, well, just who am I, right? I'm a little sentimental. I cry easily when my kids send me things. I'm super self-deprecating. My kids send me TikToks all the time about how mom has her sweater and she comes in. She's like, so how are we doing today? And I share those with my teams. I'll be like, oh yeah, here's the latest TikTok I got, and it becomes disarming a little bit, and so that you're not, I talked to a bunch of female employees and I said, I spent most of my life feeling like I had imposter syndrome, that I didn't belong where I was, when I was at Harvard, I felt completely like I didn't belong, and so part of it is just allowing. When people hear that, they're like, oh, I feel that way too, and it's okay to feel that way.
We talked about this earlier, it is easier to do that when you have your own business.
Correct.
I've certainly, felt that. My wife works at American Express, and she's now actually going to be leaving and joining the business, but hasn't had that feeling of freedom and luxury to kind of be herself, I think, to an extent. So do you think this is possible to achieve in a more traditional corporate environment? And if so, how do you navigate that? I mean, is it just this case of sharing, hey, this is more about me, this is my family, and is COVID maybe an excuse to do that?
Yeah, I do think that's some of it. I think that part of it is just stepping into it a little bit and starting to share that in small ways. I don't know if there's a particular framework that's needed, but rather just, again, like kids, exercising that muscle as an adult and knowing that you can be vulnerable, right? I mean, I think Brene Brown and others talk about this so much, and they're masters at having those conversations. But I must say, it really is true. The more vulnerable you can be about your own insecurities, you give permission to others to feel the same. And in many ways, we have this construct that you're running a team at Amex or someplace else, and you need to have it all together, right? Because you've got to be inspiring, and to be inspiring means that you know everything. And what we don't learn enough is that actually being inspiring is saying you don't know everything, but in fact, you're willing to ask for help, And so I think it's those sort of mental framework changes that we need to make so that it's not about proving our worth, which I think was a generational mindset, and certainly if you look at Gen Z and millennials, I think certainly Gen Z, we're going to see a new crop of kids coming into the workplace that are very much about their own identity and bringing that into the discussion. And they're not afraid of that, and so I think that will be also an interesting dynamic between millennials and Gen Z, as we evolve, right? And the way that we think of our own identity.
Yeah. And it's almost just taking that chance, taking that risk to put yourself out there.
Just step into it. Step into it.
Yeah. Part of what I find helps with this is just realizing that no one's got it figured out. You don't have to pretend, exactly. Right?
Yes.
Everyone's learning as they go.